This is something of an informal video. I planned to get a video out on elite theory for a simple explanation of elite theory later this week, but the recent passing of the hate speech laws here in Australia and a video by a good friend of mine, Bamblers Britannica, on why the right never wins sort of prompted me to make this video. And the question in my mind is not why the right never wins, but even if it can the right actually win? Is it even a political possibility? And what I mean by this is that there are multiple different avenues that different rightist groups, no matter what ideology, take to secure power from the current regime. One of the most popular ones is infiltration, in which a following of right-wing individuals, usually young men, join mainstream conservative parties, such as the Republicans in the United States. And the thing with this sort of idea is that all these major conservative parties have safeguards against this exact type of movement. They will either not allow these sorts of individuals into the party, or if they do, they will not be allowed to move up in the ranks in any sort of important regard. They'll just be invited along to the conferences and will sit and watch as the more moderates get up there and give a talk. They'll never be allowed to express their own views, because if they do, they'll immediately be shut out. So even if they want to play it sneaky and pretend to go along, they're not really achieving anything by doing that, because they're not in a position where they can speak their own mind and put new ideas forward, because if they do, they'll just be kicked out. The second theory is building a parallel group to the current regime, like a third party, like the British National Party, or an active club. And the problem, again, with this is that these groups pretty much already almost always get shut down, either by being banned outright, or if they're not banned outright due to whatever reason, maybe there's certain laws against that in the rulings of their country. They're bogged down with lawfare, where they're constantly being taken to court over nothing. Their members are being harassed by the police, taken to court over nothing, and given ridiculous sentences for nothing. And it eventually gets to the point where these members either drop off because they're sick of dealing with the harassment and their organisation's not growing, or the party or group is just banned outright because they're too much of an issue for the system. Another avenue put forward is to pretty much just wait until the collapse happens, wait until the effects of mass immigration and multiculturalism and isolation of communities takes hold, and the societies of the West just start to break down. And again, the issue with this is that usually they'll use South Africa or Brazil or Mexico as an example of what happens when this sort of breakdown occurs. And the thing with all those is that they still have central governments ruling over their countries. There are a lot of areas that aren't directly controlled by the government, where they're basically not in charge, but they still have a central government still running over things. Like South Africa. South Africa is pretty much a picture of what the West will become in a few generations, and yet they still generate billions of dollars of tourism and all that sort of stuff. So even despite all the problems they have, even though they're pretty much an anarchy with no order, they still are able to function and bring in foreign tourism. And another issue with that is having a central government, even if they still don't control most of the regions of their own country, means that if these nationalists then decide now's the chance to spring up and make their move, they'll pretty much just be immediately invaded or bombed or whatever. Like, let's take Britain as an example. If the effects of mass immigration and all that sort of stuff was to take place in Britain in a few generations, where the state collapses, or there's a sort of South Africa or Brazilification of Britain, and these nationalists, these British nationalists, were able to seize control of a northern part of the country, and like around York or whatever, just for an example, the central government would still pretty much put all of their attention on slapping that down. They'd bomb it, they'd invade it, they might even drop a nuke on it. It depends on the country, depends on how much of a threat they see it as. But either way, they'd put all of their effort into just stopping it. They put all of their effort into making sure that it's just completely stamped out. They don't care about the gangs. They don't care about the other parallel societies created by immigrant populations. They pretty much put all their effort into slapping down the native population. The only true hopes, really, from this sort of perspective is that the collapse either is a total collapse, like in China, where it's just warlords and there's no government really able to execute any authority significantly, where they can't just slap down any opposing warlord that they don't like, or a sort of world revolution in the West where all the governments would have to be overthrown simultaneously, because if it's just one, then the rest of the Western world will just invade it. If France was to have like a proper right-wing revolution, if someone at least ideologically similar to Marine Le Pen's father was to take over the country and begin instituting the sort of politics that they'd be interested in, if they were to do that, the rest of NATO would immediately invade. They'd destroy France and they'd put a new, more agreeable government back on the table, back in charge. So it'd take pretty much the entire Western world overthrowing their governments simultaneously over the course of a couple of weeks or a couple months, maybe. It would pretty much take that to stop any sort of action happening that would destroy these sorts of governments taking over, even if they were able to get to that point, which is a big, very unrealistic sort of thing. Especially if America doesn't, because if all the rest of the Western world has nationalist governments, if America is still the way it is, they're fucked. They're not going to be able to do anything, because America will just come in and they will just give all of them the Iraq treatment. They'll give them the Afghanistan treatment. There will be regime changes everywhere. We talk about regime change in Iran. This won't even have any hesitation. They will regime change it like that. So the only hope would be for all of the Western countries, especially America, to overthrow their current governments and replace them with new, more right-wing elites. But that's highly unrealistic. A bit of a black pill, I must say, but that's just the way I honestly feel. If you can't tell, this video isn't scripted very well, hence all my slip-ups and going and ah and ah. But yeah, that's just the way I feel. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.